for happy birthday to you, to Luis, and to Sasha. Here we go. Are you ready? Wait, I have to get my guitar, which I do not know how to play. So that's perfect. Here we go. 1 and a 2 and a 3. Good job, you guys. That was very terrible. Excellent work. Excellent work. Sasha, what are you going to do for your birthday this weekend?
Today I go to my grandma's house.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow, one of my mom's friends is gonna come over to help build my dream room. And
whoa. What is a dream room?
I've wanted a room for a long time, or one of my put together my room.
So you get to decorate it?
Yeah, we're gonna build some furniture and stuff.
Ooh.
And then on Sunday we go to a water park. On Monday I go celebrate with my dad.
Yay.
Next week, Saturday or Sunday, we're gonna go to K1 and Top Golf.
Well, that sounds like a 2-week birthday. That's pretty good. You're doing well. That's very exciting. All right. Will you take a picture of your dream room when you get it done?
Sure.
If you send it to me, I could use it as my backdrop. Right now, I'm in the Oval Office in Washington, D.C. How do you like that? I'm the president.
No, you're not.
I see Vivi shaking her head. No, you're not.
You're not. You're a teacher, you're not the president.
All right, I'm curious. So today, one of you asked if we could go to Washington, D.C. So I did choose a cool little, it's like a 20-30 minute field trip to Washington, D.C. But before we get started, I think it would be interesting to know, one thing I love about teaching fifth grade is a year that we learn a lot about our government and how it works and what our nation was founded on, the ideas it was founded on. I think one of the things is when I grew up in school, we learned a lot about being patriotic. So we sang patriotic songs and we learned one version of history, and that was that the United States was a great nation and everything in it was good. Now, we know that that's not entirely true, right? The United States, like any nation, has made a lot of mistakes. But as we learn more and more about what our nation is based on, I think I can make an argument for you guys that you should be pretty proud to be an American. Now, you might not feel that way right now because of things that you know about or things that your family has said. But right now, when you think of that word patriotic, what comes to mind? Put a word or two into the chat if you can. What does that word patriotic bring to mind to you? Good things, bad things, pride, not pride, the government trying to trick you? What is it that brings to mind? If I say patriotic, what does that word mean? And maybe you don't know at all. Maybe you've never heard that word, patriotic.
I've never heard that word.
It's based from a Latin word that I don't know the Latin word, but patri or patria, it means like fatherland or from the father. Okay, I see some negative responses. That's okay. It's okay. I'm curious because in the past, you know, when we talked about it, we just kind of say one version. Now we kind of say both. Sophia, nice. Thanks for being brave and putting some words in there, guys, just to think about. I'm waiting for a few more responses. So some people are thinking negative things, maybe especially if your family has had a hard time in this country because of our immigration policies. Interesting. So I'm just going to read you a tiny little bit of this book. It's called History Why. And the part that I really want to read you is, let me see if I can find it. Here. History is especially important for Americans. In many nations, Japan or Sweden, for instance, most citizens share a common background. They have a similar look. They may worship the same church. That isn't true for America. Some of us were once Chinese or Italian or Turkish or Ethiopian. Americans don't all look alike. Sometimes we don't think alike, but as Americans, we do share something. It is our history. We Americans share a common heritage. If you are American, then the Indians, the Vikings, the Pilgrims, and the slaves are all your ancestors. You will want to know their stories. Before we were a nation, we were ruled by England. Many Americans wanted to be free, so they wrote a Declaration of Independence explaining their goals. It begins like this, the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It also says that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. What does that mean? Consider those words about equality and happiness. In past times, governments didn't worry about things like that. Our declaration changed ideas in the whole world. It was written in 1776, and since then, it has inspired people all over the world in battles for freedom and fairness. Which brings me to this book's theme. It is this, and this book is written by Joy Hakim. It's a history book, but it's a little different than most history books. And Joy says, I'd kind of like to pin my screen, but anyway, I'll just keep reading. She says, brings me to this book's theme. It is this. I believe the United States of America is the most remarkable nation that has ever existed. No other nation in the history of the world has ever provided so much freedom, so much justice, and so much opportunity to so many different people. Now, that's a big statement, and you don't have to agree with it. Arguing with the book's theme is okay. Some people will tell you of evil forces in the United States. They will tell you of past horrors like slavery and war. They will tell you of poverty and injustice today, and they will be telling the truth. So I'm not trying to say those things didn't happen or aren't happening now. They did and they are. The United States is not perfect. Far from it. Being fair to everyone in a large nation made up of people from all different nations is really hard, and there are not many countries that are doing that. We are probably the biggest nation of immigrants in the world. And by immigrants, I mean people who come from different nations. And everyone is an immigrant. Unless you are a Native American, your family and your ancestors are immigrants to this country, right? Being fair to everyone in a large nation is very difficult. Do you treat everyone you know equally? How about people you don't like? The US government has made some terrible mistakes. It is still making mistakes. But usually this nation can and does try to correct its mistakes. That is because we are a democracy. Power belongs to the people, not the rulers. And in fact, you guys are 10 and 11 years old. In just a few years, you'll be voting. You will be the people making the decisions in this country, because that's how it works here. We are also a nation governed by law, and that is very important. No one is above the law. Everyone, the president, congressmen, congresswomen, and you live by the same laws. Our top or supreme law is the Constitution. Even bad presidents and Congresses obey the Constitution. They have to. They can be impeached, which means brought to trial if they don't. The Constitution of the United States was the first national constitution written by ordinary people who intended to govern themselves. The first one in the world where people intended to govern themselves. Before then, it had always been kings or chiefs or rulers or autocrats or somebody like that, military commanders. But we decided we wanted to rule ourselves, the people, which was a new idea. Nobody had ever done it before. Our Constitution starts with we, the people. You are part of the people. The Constitution's writers knew they were human and that their work might need improving. They made sure the Constitution could be changed through amendments. Right away, there were 10 amendments called the Bill of Rights that guarantee basic freedoms. And I'm going to stop right now. It goes on. But I want you to think about that as you watch this little video. It is presented by the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden. The president's wife is a doctor. She's actually a doctor of education. She's a teacher. And she does this little tour of Washington, D.C. for you. And I just want you to think, maybe open your mind and think about both sides of being an American. Yes, there are hard things about being an American, hard things in this country, but I challenge you to find a country in the world that's doing or trying harder to make things fair for everyone, because that just doesn't really exist. So challenge you to look at the good side of this country, because I'm proud to be an American, and I'm hoping that by the end of this year, you will be too. Let's watch the video. Oh, that's our avatar. Here we go.
Welcome to Washington, D.C. Since the early 1800s, this city has been the capital of the United States. It's where the federal government does its work, and it's where students just like you come to see our historic monuments, museums, and parks. This year, we're bringing Washington, D.C. and some of its special places to you. One of those special places is where I am right now, the White House. I'm standing at the north front door, and here's a fun fact. Did you know that there's no back door to the White House? So whenever you walk in, whether it's north, south, east, or west doors, you're always walking in the front. And we've got a lot more fun facts in store for you during this Discovery Education virtual field trip, so that you and other students can go behind the scenes and learn more about our capital city, the city of us.
What do you think about when you picture Washington, D.C.?
How about the President of the United States?
How about Congress and the Supreme Court?
How about all of the monuments to famous Americans?
How about all of the fun things you can see in the museums?
Cherry blossoms and fireworks on the 4th of July? Even that ceremony every Thanksgiving when the president pardons a turkey?
Washington, D.C. is all of these things and a whole lot more.
Did you know that Washington, D.C. isn't the only capital we've had? New York City and Philadelphia were also capitals of the United States before it moved to Washington, D.C.
Did you also know that Washington, D.C. isn't a state? It's a federal district, the District of Columbia, which is what the D.C. stands for. During the City of Us virtual field trip, we're going behind the scenes to 6 special places in and around Washington, D.C. that people of all ages love to see when they visit.
Along the way, we're also going to answer some of the questions you may have about these places. So let's head to our first stop, the White House.
1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is one of the most famous addresses in the world.
Do you know how the White House got its name? Well, a popular legend is that white paint was used to cover up burn marks on the building after British soldiers set fire to it during the War of 1812.
The true story is that the building was covered with a special type of whitewash paint to protect the stone exterior from moisture and cracking during winter freezes.
Over the years, people began describing the building as the White House, but it wasn't until 1901 that President Theodore Roosevelt officially named it the White House.
The White House is huge. It has 6 floors, 132 rooms, 28 fireplaces, and 4 kitchens. There's also a swimming pool, tennis court, movie theater, and even a bowling alley. As you wind through these hallways and rooms, you not only see paintings, sculptures, and other priceless objects, you also get a sense of just how much history has happened here.
Like the East Room, which has been the setting for countless presidential speeches, concerts, and other important ceremonies through the years.
Or the State Dining Room, where presidents throw fancy parties for leaders from other countries. As many as 140 guests can be seated here for dinner. Now those 4 kitchens make a lot more sense.
Many of the rooms are named for the color they're painted, like the blue room, red room, green room, and yellow room. Which brings us to our first question.
Hi, my name's Olivia and I'm in the 6th grade. Dr. Biden, do you have a favorite room in the White House?
Thank you for your question. You know, there are many, many special rooms in the White House, but I want to show you one that's really interesting. So follow me. Here we are in the blue room. And it's called the Blue Room because everything in here is blue. The furniture is blue, the draperies are blue, the rug is blue, the upholstery is blue. You can see how beautiful this is. So one thing that you might notice is that the shape of this room is an oval. So if you can see it as the camera follows around. And you know, there are 4 rooms in the White House that are oval rooms. There's this room, there's one room above, there's one room below this, and that's called the diplomatic room because it's where we receive diplomats. And of course, there's the famous oval room, the Oval Office where the president works. The Blue Room is used mainly for receptions or receiving guests. But one thing that we do that makes this room even more special is that every year the Christmas tree is in this room. The Christmas tree is placed right here, but if you look above, there's a chandelier. So they take the chandelier down and then they use the electric that they use for the chandelier to light the Christmas tree. There's a lot of history in this room. There are a lot of antiques. And if you notice the paintings on the wall, some of the antiques here by the fireplace, the vases. The president and I aren't really afraid of breaking anything, but you know, we do have 2 dogs, and sometimes they can be seen running through the hallway, so we have to be careful with them. Well, I've saved the best for last, so I want you to come with me as I take you outside to the balcony. I want to show you the view. So as you can see in the distance is the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial. It's one of the most beautiful views in all of the city. Think of how many presidents have stood in this very spot and looked out. And this is where my husband Joe and I stood the night of his inauguration to see the fireworks, and we felt so welcomed into office.
The U.S. Capitol, 2 miles up Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House, is the next stop on the City of Us virtual field trip.
With its massive cast iron dome weighing almost 9 million pounds, it's one of the most recognizable government buildings in the world. It's also home to the legislative branch of our government.
When our country's founders wrote the U.S. Constitution, they divided the government into 3 branches. Under a system called checks and balances, each branch was given special powers that allow it to block or check the other 2 branches. The system makes sure no branch becomes too powerful and keeps the government in balance.
The legislative branch, or Congress, makes the laws. The executive branch, or presidency, enforces them. And the judicial branch, including the Supreme Court, judges whether they're fair or not.
Congress itself has 2 parts. The Senate has 100 members, 2 from each state.
The House of Representatives has 435 voting members. The size of each state's population determines how many representatives it gets. Both the House and Senate have to vote in favor of a law for it to be sent to the president.
Before we head inside, let's take our next student question, which is about the Capitol Dome.
Hi, my name is Andrew, and I'm in 7th grade. What is the smallest statue on top of the Capitol Dome?
Well, thank you for your question. That statue may look small from the ground, but that statue is 19.5 feet tall, weighs 15,000 pounds, and is made of bronze. The statue is called the Statue of Freedom. The Statue of Freedom is symbolic. It is symbolic of the freedom that we depend on in our country, that is a foundation of our country. That complicated headdress was not in the original design. The original design had a simple freedman's cap, which is what they used in ancient Rome to indicate that a person who had been formerly enslaved was free. But at the time this was designed, the Secretary of War did not want the symbol of a freed, enslaved person to be on the top of the Capitol. Now there's more to the story. The metalworker, who was the principal person who made it, Philip Reed, was an enslaved person when he started to build the Statue of Freedom. During the time that he was building it, he was granted his freedom when President Lincoln freed the enslaved people in Washington, D.C., 7 months before he was finished. So for those last 7 months of building the Statue of Freedom, Philip Reed was paid for his labor. So now we're inside the dome. When you look from outside, you see that dome. Now you can see what's inside. Inside is the Capitol Rotunda. I want you to look up and see the apotheosis of Washington. This is a painting that elevates Washington. You look to either side. He has freedom on one side and victory on the other side. And on the side of freedom, freedom holds the Constitution. On the side of victory, victory has the trumpet of victory, trumpeting the victory of this new country. And surrounding George Washington are 13 women representing the original 13 states. It's an incredible statement of unity and freedom. The Freedman's Cap appears in the apotheosis. Even though it didn't appear on the Statue of Freedom on top of the building, it is right there inside the building. Because it was put there by the artist, Constantino Bermudi. He wanted everybody to know that the concept of freedom was going to last in this country forever. It is our most sacred space. Here in the Rotunda, we come together at times of great tragedy when we have people laying in state. And the honor to lay in state in the Rotunda has only been given to 41 people in the history of the country. Presidents, great dignitaries. We also are here where the Congressional Gold Medal is given. So at a time of great celebration and honor, we come together in the Rotunda. Below us is the crypt. The crypt means a burial place, which would make you wonder who's buried there. Actually, no one. It was built to be George Washington's burial place. However, it wasn't completed until 25 years after his death, and he was buried at Mount Vernon, and his family wanted to keep his body at his home. And in the very center of the crypt, there is a compass star, which is the geographical center of Washington, D.C. Did you know that George Washington and Pierre L'Enfant chose the location of the Capitol? They chose it because it was up on a hill, because it was the center of the city, because they believed that the legislative branch, Article 1 of our Constitution, was the most important branch. And they wanted the Capitol building to dominate this incredible new city that they were planning. And so the very center of the Capitol is the very center of the city. So thank you so much for your question. I am so happy to share the stories. I hope you'll get to come in person because this building belongs to you.
Just a short walk from the Capitol is the highest court in our country, the Supreme Court.
In a typical courtroom, there's just one judge making sure things run properly. On the Supreme Court, there are 9 judges, called justices.
Justices hear about 80 cases every year, out of as many as 8,000 that are considered.
Which ones get picked? In order for any case to make it to the Supreme Court, a minimum of 4 of the 9 justices have to want to hear it. This is called the Rule of 4.
It's important to remember that the Supreme Court doesn't make laws. It offers opinions on whether they're fair or not.
The justices listen to lawyers argue their sides of a case, and when 5 or more agree, their opinion becomes the majority opinion. Justices are appointed to the Supreme Court for a lifetime term, meaning they can do this important job for as long as they want.
The Supreme Court has become more diverse over the years. In 1916, Louis Brandeis became the first justice who was Jewish.
51 years later, Thurgood Marshall was the first black justice appointed to the court. Sandra Day O'Connor became the first woman to serve on the court in 1981. And Sonia Sotomayor, appointed in 2009, was the first justice who was Hispanic. Let's go to our next student question.
Hi, my name is Dominic, and I am in 10th grade. How does a person get to become a Supreme Court justice?
That's a really great question, and it's actually pretty hard to become a Supreme Court justice. There are 3 basic steps. First, there has to be an opening or a vacancy on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can only have 9 people on it at a time. After a vacancy happens, it's up to the president to pick someone through a process called nomination. And then it's up to the Senate to vote on the nominee the president has selected. The decisions that the Supreme Court justices make are very important. They affect everyone in the entire country. I had the privilege of being a law clerk to Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Justice Sotomayor is one of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court. And every year she hires some young lawyers like myself to work with her on the Supreme Court as what are called law clerks. Law clerks help the justices write their decisions, what are called judicial opinions, and also to do research and to get ready to hear the cases that are brought before the Supreme Court. Being a law clerk is a wonderful experience. It was the highlight of my working career, the best job I ever had.
Everywhere you go in Washington, D.C., you'll see statues.
I'm going to have to pause it there because we're running out of time. I wanted to speak just for a minute about some of the debate in the chat. I think sometimes you see that debate and you think, oh, we're fighting. But I think the difference between a fight and a debate or an exchange of ideas is if you're fighting, people just say things, they don't listen to each other, they don't take in information. When you're debating or kind of throwing around ideas, you're listening to each other, you're taking in their information and responding to it, and you're backing up your opinions with facts and evidence and telling why you think those things. Having different opinions isn't bad, it's great. In fact, it's what our nation is founded on. The idea that instead of just the majority ruling, that we listen to a lot of different opinions and try to decide what the best way to move forward is. Even though our country has a lot of problems, as you study what our nation was founded on, I think you're going to be pretty impressed at the ideas these people had about the way a country could run. And everyone told them there was no way it would work. And sometimes it doesn't, but we're trying. I think we're trying. Okay, so it is almost time for specials. Sophia, if you could stay just for a minute, I want to help you set up your conference on your calendar. And Vivi, do you have a question right now before we go?
When we were doing the little typing in the chat, I wanted to type in democracy, but I didn't know how to say it.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for saying that. It's a really, really novel idea. There are not many true democracies. And when we formed ours, it was really the first one in the world. Everybody was like, democracy, that's not going to work. You need to have a ruler who's telling people what to do.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people complain about the government, but the problem is what you have to understand is we are the government. We pay the taxes, we vote, so we kind of are the government. How much you choose to be involved is kind of your choice, but I hope some of you will plan on being in the government, helping rule this country, because we need good people like you. All right, my friends, we'll finish watching the field trip at 10 o'clock when you come back. Have a good time at specials. Sophia, stay with me for a minute so we can set up that conference, okay?
I actually already watched that video in last
Did you?
video.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
I don't know what's gonna
So
happen.
Sophia, did you leave? Uh-oh. Did you?
Bye.
Sophia, are you gone? Bye. I think she is gone. I don't see her. Ah, she's gone. I lost her. Okay. Well, I think you guys all have your conferences set up, so you're okay. Go ahead and go, guys.